1 Samuel chapter number 30. We've been looking at the life of David, the story of David over these last couple weeks. Next Sunday is the last Sunday in this series. It is hard to believe, but after next Sunday, the very next Sunday, we'll be starting our Christmas series. What? December 1st is only 2 weeks away, so y'all better be acting good, right? People are starting to watch now, trying to figure out if they actually want to spend money on you for Christmas or not. I just got to tell you, this week we had an unexpected expense at our house, and the guy was like, do you actually want to do this? Do you want to pay for this? And I was like, no, not really. And he was like, okay, well, he said, you probably should, or else it's just going to break again in a week. And I was like, well, let me talk to my wife. I need to see if she wants to fix this or if she wants Christmas. Right? She got to make the choice, right? But anyway, so that's coming up in a couple weeks. But in our Bibles, 1 Samuel chapter number 30, somebody's like, man, that wife of his needs prayer. Right? Somebody's got to pray for her. 1 Samuel 30, we've been looking at David over these last couple weeks in this series, Mood. And here at this point in 1 Samuel 30, we see that David and his men have returned to a place called Ziklag. Now, Ziklag is where all of their families were, all of their possessions, everything that they had was at Ziklag. And when they return to Ziklag, they find that all of this stuff has been taken by a group of people called the Amalekites. The Amalekites have taken everything from them. Here in this moment, we see David and his men experience true, total loss. They lose everything. I mean, everything. They've lost their wives. They lose their children. They lose their livestock. They lose all of these things. And so David's men actually turn on him in this moment. And it says, starting in 1 Samuel 30, verse 6, that David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. You ever had somebody who was supposed to have your back that turned on you? You ever had somebody that was supposed to be there for you? It's no wonder that David was distressed. It's no wonder that he was freaking out here, because the very men who had his back that he's been fighting with are now wanting to fight against him. They're talking of stoning him. You ever had somebody that just that quick, they completely turned on you? You thought they were for you. You thought they were with you. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, now they're coming against you. And it's like, what just happened? What just happened? It's craziness. So David's sitting here, and he has the very men that are supposed to be with him. It says, each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and daughters. But David found strength in the Lord his God. And then David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. And Abiathar brought it to him, and David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? This is such an important step by David here, and I don't want to overlook it because it has nothing to do with what I'm going to preach on today, but it's too important just to kind of glaze over. It says that David inquired of the Lord before he pursued them. Before he took that step. A lot of times we inquire of the Lord after we take the step, and then we wonder why we get into a mess. But David inquired of the Lord before he ever pursued this raiding army. He said, God, am I supposed to do what I am about to do? Not, oh God, I did this and I shouldn't have, I'm sorry. But God, am I supposed to do in advance? How much different our lives might look if we would inquire of the Lord before we do what we want to do instead of after we do what we want to do. The truth is, a lot of times we don't inquire of the Lord because we already know the answer and we don't like it. So we just get into the mess and then pray for God to get us out of it. But anyways, it says that God told him, pursue them. You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. And David and the 600 men with him came to the Besor Valley, where some stayed behind. 200 of them were too exhausted to cross the valley, but David and the other 400 continued the pursuit. 200 of them were too exhausted, but David and the other 400 continued the pursuit. See, in this text today, we see that David finds himself in somewhat of a lonely situation. See, being a leader in general can lend itself to lonely seasons. But now David has actually done something, and because of his decision, his men have lost their wives, their children, and their livestock. because of something that David did, they've lost all these things. So now they've kind of retracted a little bit. They've drawn back a little bit into seclusion away from David. And David had a decision to make. He had a choice. He had a choice. He had a choice. Does he want to also draw back into isolation? Because if we're honest, that's most generally our first instinct, right? If somebody does something to us or if somebody draws back away from us, our first instinct is to also draw back. And we really can't blame you, because if you've lived for any amount of time, then you've experienced hurt from people who you loved, from people who you cared about, from people who you thought had your back, from people who you supported. You've experienced that kind of hurt. So it's understandable to want to retract into isolation when you're going through a difficult time. To retract into isolation when the people who were with you are now against you. That would be understandable. But David made a conscious effort to be intentional about community. In this moment of pure loneliness for him, he chose to be intentional about community. And he said, you know what? He said, I know that I may look like I'm alone. I know that I might feel like I'm alone. But the truth is, David was never alone. He was never alone. Bible says that he found his strength in the Lord, his God. Even though he looked alone, he was never alone. Even though the people left him, David was never on his own. See, a lot of times when people leave our lives, we suddenly say, oh, well, now I'm alone. Right? That person that you loved, that you cared about, you invested in, they leave your life and it's like, well, now I'm alone. Now I feel lonely. And David had all these people that have turned against him. And in that moment when he could have said, I'm alone, instead he said, I'm finding my strength in the Lord my God. And I want to talk to you this morning on the subject, left but not alone. Left but not alone. Let's pray together. God, we thank you for today, and we just thank you for your presence, for the opportunity to come into this place today and to hear from you and to grow in your word. And I pray that you would help each and every person that's here, Lord, not to see and to hear from me, but to see and to hear from you. May we have hearts that are open and receptive to apply what you speak to our lives. And we thank you for it in Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever dropped a baby? What? Anybody? Thank you. I got one honest person in the house, two honest people. You ever dropped a baby before? It's kind of awkward to talk about, but I'm all about awkward, so I'm just going to throw it out there. I'll be 100% honest. Judah and Elijah, our sons, are in such better hands when my wife is holding them. Like whenever my wife is responsible for watching them, our kids are way, way better off. If you ever see me holding our child, feel free to come and help, because it's probably not going to end well. I do not have a good track record with making sure that kids stay above the ground. You know what I'm saying? Like not dropping, not falling. I don't have a good track record with this. I mean, I've tried to get better at it, but I don't have a good track record with it. This is why whenever we do baby dedications, I let the parents hold the baby. Right? Some of y'all been wondering. My parents, they always would hold the baby. They'd hold the baby up like Simba, let everybody see it. They'd kiss the baby. I'm like, the parent can hold the baby, because the last thing we need is to dedicate a baby to the Lord and then have to raise the baby back from the dead. Like, we don't need all of that all on the same Sunday. So I just let the parents hold their own baby. I just don't have a good track record with holding children. I've dropped a couple kids in my day. Just be honest. I'm going to throw it out there. Judge me if you want. I feel it. It's okay. But I've dropped a few kids in my day. And the first child that I ever dropped was named, well, I'm not going to tell you the name because maybe you know them. I don't know. But my wife and I, the baby was at our house, and the baby could not sleep in the crib yet. So she had to sleep on our bed. And this baby comes crawling over me in the middle of the night, and I'm a little jumpy. And so I jumped, and when I did, baby went flying off the bed and landed on her head. Now, y'all like, whose baby was this? Maybe you know them. Maybe you don't. I don't know. I'm not going to say. But all I know is the baby survived, and that's the important thing, right? That's the important thing. But we didn't tell them because it was like, why worry them, right? Unless the baby one day starts going like this randomly, then maybe we'll let them know. But as long as everything's okay, there's no point in telling. But up until a few weeks ago, that was the only baby that I was responsible for hitting the ground. Okay? That was the only baby. But that changed. I had only dropped somebody else's child. I had never dropped my own. But that changed. So a few weeks ago, on Halloween afternoon, we went with a group of friends to go to about 4 or 5 houses. Take Judah, take Elijah, just go get some big candy bars because Nicole and I were hungry. And so we were like, we're going to take the kids and we're going to do this. And I was in charge of watching Elijah. Now, for those of you who don't know, Elijah is our 3-month-old son. I was put in charge of the one who can't walk yet. I don't know why, but I was. Maybe because the other one could have run away from me into the street. So I'm there to watch Elijah. And we get to about the second house. And my wife and some of the friends, they go up to the house. She takes Judah. And I'm standing in the driveway with our son Elijah in his car seat, not buckled in the stroller, right? And if you remember, it was absolutely freezing that day. Freezing. Like, I don't think I've ever been so cold in my entire life. So they go walking up to this house. I'm chilling in the driveway. Elijah's covered up in the stroller, and I'm cold. So I go and I take 5 seconds. That's all it takes. 5 seconds. I take my hand off the stroller to pull my hood up over my head. Y'all think the stroller took off? No. It wasn't my fault. Let me just say that. Because y'all are sitting here and you're judging. It was not my fault. I'm going to go ahead. And you're like, whose fault was it? It was the wind's fault. Okay, because I take my hand off the stroller to pull my hood up, and this massive gust of wind comes, blows the side of the stroller, and it goes boom, onto the driveway. And of course, like, you know, all the women, they spring into action, you know, that motherly instinct. All us men are standing around like, Nicole comes like running. She's like, my baby. You know, it's just like, just craziness. Like Judah's like, you forgot about me already. So she comes running, you know, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, you know what? He's just a kid. He's a boy. It's part of being a boy. He'll be okay. Just kidding. I was like, ah! You know, like I'm freaking out. So I like reach down and I pick him back up. And he's crying and he's screaming, and I'm like inspecting his head, and I'm like trying to pick him up and console him, and Nicole's like, give me the baby, give me the baby. Like I've done enough damage already. So she takes the baby and she's like consoling him, and so we're like looking all over his head and everything. There was not a scratch on his head. Everything was okay as far as we know. He doesn't have any clicks yet. He's still good. Everything's been awesome. But in this moment, he's in this enclosed stroller by himself, and he's crying hysterically because he's fallen and he's confused. No doubt he had no idea what was going on. No doubt he was afraid. No doubt he was scared. No doubt he felt like he was on his own. But at the end of the day, I was there to pick him back up. See, he may have fallen, but his father was there to pick him back up. And you can hear David crying for this in 1 Samuel chapter 30. He's saying, God, Father, I need you to pick me up. I need you to pick me up. Something traumatic has happened. I'm feeling alone. I'm feeling afraid. I'm feeling scared right now. And I need you to pick me up. So first thing I need you to see this morning if you're taking notes is David said, pick me up. Pick me up. He said in verse 6, David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. And each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and daughters. But David found strength in the Lord his God. In the midst of a weak moment, David found strength. In a moment where David seemed to be alone on paper, he was in fact never alone. And you need to know today that you might feel alone, you might feel weak, you might feel afraid, but God is there to pick you up. Every time that it seems like you've fallen and you're on your own, God is there to pick you up. Every time somebody tells you that it's over for you, God is there to pick you up. Every time the person that you love the most and cared about leaves your life, God is there to pick you up. Because in the midst of this weak moment, God brings strength. God brings strength. And God is always there to pick you up. And I know like you're strong, right? And you're unfazed and you're never emotional. But for those of us like myself who have felt alone in a season, who have felt afraid in a season, who have felt like everything was over for you in a season, who have felt weak in a season, you need to know that you can find strength in God. You can find strength in him. You can find comfort in him. You can find community in him. David found his strength in the Lord his God. And it's important to note that he found his strength in God and not in people. Because if you find your strength in people, then you'll end up lonely. If you find your strength, am I saying don't have community? No. Community is of the utmost importance. But don't put your strength in the community. Put your strength in God and allow him to build the community that you need around you. But the foundation has to be God. Even in your marriage, if the foundation is your spouse, then you will end up lonely. If the foundation of your marriage is not found on God, then you will end up lonely because people and their opinions change. People's preferences change. People's loyalties change. In fact, people are like a Hungry Jack biscuit, right? They're flaky. Somebody's like, what? They're flaky. They're flaky. They can be here today, gone tomorrow, there the next day, gone the next day. They're constantly going all over the place. People constantly bounce around. And you may find your strength in them now, but what are you going to do when they're not there later? If you find all your strength in them in this moment, what are you going to do when that person is no longer there? What are you going to do when you call them and they don't pick up the phone? What are you going to do when you have a difficult situation on your job and instead of relying on God, you've been relying on your mentor, and so when you call them, they don't pick up the phone, and now you don't know what to do because you've never gone to God before. You've constantly relied on that person. What are you going to do when the person that you've constantly depended on for everything over God is no longer there? David said, I'm finding my strength not in my team, not in the people around me. I'm finding my strength in the Lord God. I'm finding my strength in the one who's never left me. I'm finding my strength in the one who's never forsaken me. David said, listen, I've been in a difficult place before. I've seen people trying to kill me before. I've seen people coming against me before. And every time I went through that, it wasn't you that was with me. It wasn't you that was with me. It was God that was with me. In every single situation that I've gone through, the constant thing that has never left me is that he was there. But when our strength is in people, and when our confidence is in people, then when they leave, or when their opinions change, or their preferences change, then we end up lonely. And it does not mean that they're bad people. They're just people. Like you and I are the same way. Like people should not put their strength in us. People should not find their strength in us because we're flaky. We're flaky. We change. People change. People's preferences change. Who people are change. Like literally, you can look at yourself. You ever gone back and looked at pictures of you from 10 years ago? Like, what was I thinking with my hair? What was I thinking with what I was wearing? What was I thinking with who I was with? What was I thinking with that job? Like, why would I have even ever entertained that? Like, people change. We grow, and we outgrow things. Sometimes others outgrow things faster than others. It does not mean that they're bad people. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that people change. And if your strength was in people, then it's gone when they're gone. If your strength was in the title that they gave you, then it's gone when the title's gone. If your strength was in their opinion of you and what they said about you, then your strength is gone when their opinion of you is gone. When you find your strength in people, then when all of these things leave or all of these things change, then it completely unravels our identity. It unravels who we are. So then we end up feeling like we're lonely because the people or the person that we believed in, that we depended on for everything is no longer there, and now we feel like we're all on our own. We feel lonely, but we're not lonely. We're in the middle of this series dealing with our feelings and our emotions, with our mood, because a lot of times we can feel like we're lonely, but the truth is loneliness is a lie of the enemy. You are never alone. So long as you are breathing and alive on this earth, and even when you leave it, you are never alone because God is always there. He's always there. And to say that you are lonely because somebody else left your life shows that you don't really value God. As if God is chump change. Yeah, I know God's there. Shut up, Pastor. You've said it 5 times already this morning. I get it. But you don't know how they broke my heart. You don't know how I had 10 friends and now it's down to 1 because I got older and I had kids and they didn't have kids yet. And so now they're constantly wanting to go do things that I can't do because I got kids. You don't know what it's like to be at home alone with your kids, but at least you have your kids and at least you have God. Yeah, I know I got God, but all these other people left my life, and God's up there, and he's like, hello? I'm just so lonely. Just alone all the time. No, you're not. I feel like I'm just talking to myself. Talk to God. Talk to God. David's like, listen, they've all left me. They've all abandoned me. But I'm finding my strength in the Lord my God. He said it best in Psalm 73:26. He said, my heart and my flesh may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Forever. Never changing, never ending, forever. The beginning, the end, the same, the middle. God is there. He is the portion forever. Somebody with a Sandlot reference. Forever. Never leaves, never forsakes us. He's always there. Never leaves, never abandons us. And hear me on this. The voice that you believe will determine the future that you experience. Not the voice that you hear, but the voice that you believe determines the future that you will experience. What voice are you listening to? Are you listening to the voice that tells you that you're alone? Are you listening to the voice that tells you that you're not worth anything? Are you listening to the voice that tells you that it's over for you? Are you listening to the voice that tells you that your best days were behind you? Your best days were before you had kids. Your best day was before you went into bankruptcy. Your best day was before the divorce. Your best day was before all these things. Are you listening to that voice? Or are you listening to the voice of God that says you are anointed, you are called, you are chosen, you are loved, you are a child of God? Because people will see you down and want to keep you there. They'll see you down and they'll try to keep you there. They'll make it look like they want to pick you up, but the truth is they just want to keep tabs on you and make sure you stay down where you're at. Not everybody that calls to check on you really wants you to be doing better. Some people are just calling to make sure you're still doing bad. Sometimes people look like they have good motives, but they don't have good motives. Some motives are a little skewed. It looks one way, but it's really another. Are you listening to those voices? Or are you listening to the voice of God who says, if you fall down, get back up. You fall down again, get back up. You fall down again, get back up. That's okay. You fall down 7 times, you can stand up 8 because your strength is not in them. It's not in what you were falling from, but your strength is in the Lord. You can fall down, but every time you can get back up. Something else that we need to realize, church, is that some is not none. Write that down. Some is not none. Here's what I mean by that. Sometimes we get distressed and distraught, and we feel like we're alone because we want everybody to like us. But you'll never get everybody to like you. You'll never get everybody to be on the same page as you. You'll never get everybody to want to be with you. And a lot of times we get so focused on that we're missing who is with us. It said in verse number 9, that David and the 600 men with him came to the Besor Valley, where some stayed behind. 200 of them were too exhausted to cross the valley, but David and the other 400 continued the pursuit. Continued the pursuit. 600 started out with David, but only 400 kept going with David. Started out with 600, but then continued on with only 400. One of the most difficult lessons to learn in life is how to be okay with letting someone leave. One of the hardest things that we have to learn is how to be okay with letting someone leave your life and how to truly appreciate the ones who stay. How to be fine with the person that left, but to also appreciate the person that stayed. Because it's going to happen. It's going to happen. People are going to leave. People that said they would be there, ride or die, man. Ride or die. They're going to leave. It's going to happen in life. And isn't that so encouraging? Isn't that what you came to church to hear? The people that you've been depending on, there's a chance in your life that they will leave. That's encouraging, right? Not really. But the truth is that it can happen. And if our worth is in them and if our strength is in them, then when they're gone, all of those things that were the foundation for our life is also gone. With the things that we were dependent on is also gone. So we have to learn that you have to let people leave. You have to be okay with letting people leave. I love this quote by a man named T.F. Tenney. He said this. He said, Jesus fed 5,000, but only 500 followed him after lunch. He had 12 disciples, but only 3 went further in the garden. And only 1 stood with him at the cross. The closer you get to the cross, the smaller the crowd becomes. The closer you get to the cross, the smaller the crowd becomes. And so often we're so busy trying to keep the masses that we're missing the miraculous. We're so busy trying to please everyone and keep everyone in sync with us and everyone to like us and everyone to want to be with us. But do you realize that you can have the most friends in the room and still be the most lonely? You can still have I have not deleted a phone number in my phone since I've deleted some. But I haven't deleted all the numbers in my phone since I got my phone when I was 13 years old. All those contacts. So you scroll through my phone, it may look like I have 6,000 friends. Truth is, I probably have 3, 4. But it looks really good when somebody's asking for a phone number and I got to pull out my phone and scroll and scroll and scroll. But you know how many of those people I can call when it's late night and I'm struggling and I'm having difficulty? Because my wife already fell asleep, because as soon as we go and get in the bed, less than 5 minutes, I'm going to watch this movie. 5 minutes later, yeah. Have all these people look so good. It's amazing. But they're not dependable. You can have the look of being the most popular one in the room, but also be the most lonely. Because the closer that you get to the cross, the closer you get to your mission, the closer you get to your calling, the closer that you get to your purpose, the closer that you get to what God is wanting to do, the more people you'll start to see falling out of your life. For David, he said, you know what? Not everyone is going with me, but that's okay. Not everyone went with David, but some did. Some did. Not everyone, but some did. And too often, we get so focused on the people that have left our life that we're not appreciating the ones that are still there. Some of the people left, but some of the people stayed. And oftentimes we feel alone, not because we are, but because we're so focused on the ones who left. We tell people, I'm lonely, I feel alone, I'm depressed because I'm lonely. But the truth is, we're not alone. It's just the one person that we had put all of our strength in left our lives while the other 3 stayed. Our son Judah has a bunch of like cars, right? Like these little, cars. It's just, it kind of stresses me out because I'm OCD, and cars end up all over the house because it's like, oh, I want that car, and then that car, and then that car, and then that car. And so he likes to carry all of the cars at one time. All of them. I mean, like 20 cars. Like he just wants to pick them up in his arms at one time. And he looks so ridiculous. I'm like, dude, can you not? Because he's like walking around like this with his arms full of all these cars. And we've been trying to help him. Like we tell him at nighttime, you can take 2 cars because he can count to 20 because he's smarter than his dad. And so I'm like, you could take 2 cars to bed, 2. So he'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4. Just see how much he can get by with. And he's constantly just wanting to take all these cars. And the problem is, we've been trying to help him understand, when you try to carry all the cars, then eventually one's going to fall out. And that's exactly what happens. He's carrying all these cars, and he looks crazy. And then he goes to pick up another car, and one of the cars falls out. And one of his favorite cars is called Mater from the movie Cars. And he's a tow truck. Tow Mater, get it? So anyways, he's like, that's one of his favorite ones. And the other day, he's walking in the house, and he's carrying all these cars, and Mater falls down. And he goes, Mater! Mater! I just watch him sometimes. It's amusing. So he's like, Mater! I'm like, bro, it's okay. He's like, Mater, please. Mater, please. Mater, please. Mater, please. I'm like, Judah, you have arms full of cars. He's like, Mater, please, Mater. And he's like bending down to go get Mater. And when he goes to reach for Mater, 3 of the other cars fall out of his arms. So now he's like, Mickey car! Pete car, Donald car. And I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do this. When you come home from preschool today, there are going to be no cars. It's going to be our new thing. But he's like, Mickey car, Mater car. And every time, without fail, am I lying? Without fail, every time with his arms full, he goes to pick up a car, more cars fall out. We're trying to help him realize that not all of the cars can go where you're going, bud. If you try to take all the cars with you where you're going, you're never going to get there because you're going to sit here and you're going to end up losing more cars than you lost to begin with because you're trying to get the one car you began with. See, some of us are going through our lives and we're trying so hard to hold on to every single relationship that we're neglecting the ones that are still there. Somebody left our life and we're so busy trying to scoop that back up that the ones who stayed are falling out on the ground. We're so busy trying to pick up little pieces that God said to leave because they can't go where you're going. They don't want to go where you're going. And God said, as long as you continue to try to pick them up, you're only holding yourself back. So we're like, Jamie! I don't know who Jamie is. Maybe that hit home. I don't know. But anyway, it's like we're calling out to the one that left, and we're neglecting the ones that stayed. And then we're wondering, why am I not progressing, and why are more people leaving my life? Because nobody wants to stay and hang around where they're not welcome. Nobody wants to stay and hang around where they're not appreciated. And so what happens is we lose the one, and then we lose the 2, and so now we're going around, I'm alone. I'm lonely. You want to go out tonight? No, I'm alone. You want to go eat? No, I'm alone. But they left me, but I'm still. And it's not just with people, but it's the same with God. He's like, listen, you're going around telling everybody that you're lonely. You're telling yourself. You're allowing it to dictate how you feel. You're allowing it to cause you to go to Walmart looking like you belong at Walmart. Because you're just allowing it to just wreck everything. I hate Walmart so much. I'm really glad I came to church last Sunday because the first place we had to go to after church was Walmart. And I needed every bit of what happened in here to carry into there. But when we lose things, And let me say this. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm not saying, oh, you lose things and you're supposed to be like, it's okay, no big deal. No, it hurts. It's hard. I get it. But don't allow losing them to take your focus off of him. Don't allow losing them to take your focus off of the people that he's left in your life. The people, maybe people that he's bringing into your life. Do you realize how closed off some of us get because of the people that hurt us? So now when God tries to send somebody new, we shun them away. You know where this happens a lot? Church. Church. I don't want to get close to anybody. I remember people come in and then they leave and then they hurt me. And I got hurt in church. But God did not hurt you. You might have gotten hurt in church, but God did not hurt you. So for you to allow what they did to take your relationship with him away and the people he wants to connect you with, it's saying that my strength was in that person. It was never in God in the first place, which is why you got to say, I'm not allowing what happened there to dictate what's happening here. God, I'm going to continue to move forward. I'm going to continue to connect, and I'm going to continue because, listen, God will send people into your life. Maybe for a season, maybe for a lifetime. See, people, they may be with you for 40, 50 years and then gone. Because the reality is all it takes is one thing. One thing. That's the truth. It takes one thing to cause somebody to leave your life. So instead of finding our strength in them, we find our strength in God, but allow him to send people into our life to go through life together. See, one thing that fascinates me about David and I find so amazing is with all the people that came against him and all the people that turned against him, David still, the last thing I need you to see, was intentional about community. He was intentional about community. He made it a point to find community. Everywhere that he went, he was looking for community. It's easy to get discouraged and to want to draw back into isolation. But isolation and loneliness is never from God. It's a temptation of the enemy. In fact, it's been said before that if Satan cannot get you to walk and your soul to walk joyfully into hell, then he'll get you and compel you to go depressed into heaven. If he cannot get you to walk joyfully into hell, then he'll compel you to walk depressed into heaven. Because it's never of God. Isolation, never of God. Loneliness, never of God. Because God is a God of community. God is the one who says, you know what? I don't want you to be alone. And I am with you, and I am sending people into your life to be with you. See, people think that Elevate groups are just a crock, and like, why do we even have them? This is why. This is why people think, well, why do I need to serve on Sunday morning? I'm coming to church. This is why. It's not always just about what you're doing. It's about why you're doing it. I'm serving so that I can be part of a team of believers so that I can get here for the 925 rally. Please, Lord Jesus. And hang out with the team and talk with them and realize that they're going through some of the things that I'm going through. Why do I go to Elevate groups? This is why. Why do I go to the Forge? I'm a guy. I'm like on my own, right? This is why. So that I can understand and realize I'm not alone. I'm not alone. You may choose to be alone, but you're not alone. You're not alone. God says, I'm sending people into your life. God, I just need a community. I gave you one. You just choose not to go. And it's so quiet because it's so true. And everybody's like, can you just end the message? You said that was your last point. But we have to realize and understand sometimes that people leave, people come, people go. But being lonely is a choice. It's a choice. Because God is our strength. And he never leaves. He never leaves. David and his 400 men, they go off. I promise I'm going to close. Everybody's getting nervous. What's he going to say now? They go off. And they defeat the Amalekites, the 400 of them. On their way back with everything, the plunder, the wives, the children, the livestock, everything, and then some. On their way back, they passed the 200 that decided not to go. On their way back, they come walking back by the 200 and they're like, oh, look what we did without you. But see, David was intentional about community. David was intentional about not letting what somebody else did to him to dictate what he was going to do to them. He was intentional about saying, you know what, I'm not going to allow the hurt that you inflicted on me to cause me to inflict it back on you. So it says in verse number 21, then David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow him and who were left behind at the Bezer Valley. And they came out to meet David and the men with him. And as David and his men approached, he asked them how they were. But all the evil men and troublemakers among David's followers said, because they did not go out with us, we will not share with them the plunder that we recovered. However, each man may take his wife and children and go. But David replied, no, my brothers, you must not do that with what the Lord has given us. You must not do that with what the Lord has given us. Your strength is not in yourself, and it was never in them. It was in the Lord. What the Lord has given us, he has protected us and delivered us into our hands, the raiding party that came against us. Who will listen to what you say? The share of the man who stayed with the supplies is to be the same as that of him who went down to battle and will share alike. Will share alike. If you're petty, you'll end up lonely. If you choose to be petty towards everybody, well, they hurt me, you're going to end up lonely. David said, our strength was never in them, it was in God. And I'm not going to treat them the way they treated me. I'm going to treat them the way that I would want them to treat me now. Because the strength was never in them. The identity was never in them. What they needed was never in them. It was in the Lord the whole time. And if you find your strength in the Lord, then it doesn't matter who leaves your life. It doesn't matter who comes against you. It doesn't matter what happens in life. If your strength is in the Lord, then you can look at every situation and say, they may have done me dirty, but I'm going to do them how God would do it. They may have said some things about me, but it wasn't dependent on them in the first place. My strength was in God from the very beginning.